Right, so I think with no further ado then, we're probably ready. So I'll hand over to Liam Renouf, who is presenting today on positive behaviour support as a normalising technology, a cartography of the mechanisms of power in the PBS competence framework. Over to you, Liam.
Hello, everyone. So yeah, thank you for the introduction. So we'll start. So a little bit about me. So I'm a neurodivergent, non-autistic ESRC-funded doctoral researcher at the University of Sheffield. And my doctoral work explores how so-called challenging behaviour is understood, produced and responded to in educational and multidisciplinary contexts, as well as how researchers represent and story the lives of non-speaking autistic research participants. I'm interested in utilising creative methodologies informed by post-structuralist and critical thought, particularly the thinking of Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari. I recently completed an MA in critical autism studies at Edge Hill in 2025, and I've previously worked as a SEN teacher at a small specialist school in North London. So this presentation is based on my MA thesis research. It was supervised by Alison, and yeah, I owe my thanks for her support throughout the process. So positive behaviour support, or PBS, is widely positioned within the UK education and social care settings as a non-aversive, rights-based intervention for people with learning disabilities and autistic people, although this is contested. Yet despite its progressive rhetoric, PBS continues to operate within a broader interventionist logic that renders autistic body minds legible through surveillance, categorization, and datafication. During critical autism studies, both post-structuralist theory and post-qualitative inquiry, this presentation offers a cartography of the PBS competence framework, examining how it functions as a normalising technology that attempts to flatten autistic rhetoricity. Conceptualizing the PBS competence framework as a normalizing technology, I trace how behavior is translated into data, documentation, and then into related interventions, producing what I describe as a flattening through which autistic rhetorics are rendered holistically determinable, functional, and correctable. Attending to effective economies and assemblages within the special needs classroom, the presentation argues that PBS participates in processes of labour extraction within the autism industrial complex, alienating autistic body minds from the affective and rhetorical intensities of their own actions. Drawing on the work of Remy Yogo, I contend that autistic rhetoricity often operates rhizomatically and in excess of metaphor, evading the capture of intervention logics that presume behaviour must signify an holistically determinable function. Methodologically, the presentation advances neuroqueering as anti-methodology, employing post-qualitative cartography, diagramming, and experimental writing to refuse linearity, epistemic closure, and representational certainty. Rather than offering solutions or improved interventions, the presentation concludes by speculatively imagining negative behaviour support as a counter-language of refusal, advocating for an accelerationist unknowing that destabilizes ontological assumptions underpinning autism intervention. In doing so, the paper positions neuroquerying not only as an analytic orientation, but as a methodological and political practice within critical autism studies. So I guess rather than kind of strict research questions, I kind of think about I thought about having departing aims within the research. So the first one is how the PBS competence framework, the text, works as a normalizing technology intervening upon non-normative body minds. How the text may be understood and explored rhizomatically as part of an assemblage, deterritorializing and reterritorializing space. How the autistic subject comes to be known through the intervention continuum, and how post-qualitative non-methodologies informed by experimental approaches rooted in post-structuralist CRIP and critical disability theory may offer new ways to think about autisms. So I hold two central commitments within this research and within all of my research. So, firstly, based on the work of Michael Orsini, to consider the generative possibilities of unknowing autisms. And secondly, to engage in the generation of new processual orientations in critical autism studies, with Broderick and Rossino referring to as exploring what the concept of autism and autistic experience, epistemologies and ontologies do to knowledge itself, to inquiry, to education, to the arts, and to cultural politics. But before we dive into the what of my research, I want to talk about the how. I don't see my research as a top-down structure or a linear path. Instead, I want you to imagine these commitments bubbling up through what I call the research assemblage. To ground this, I'm borrowing from Deleuze and Guattari's botanical metaphor, the rhizome. Unlike a tree which has a central trunk and a predictable root system, a rhizome like ginger or crouch grass is a horizontal underground stem. It puts out shoots and roots at random intervals. It appears, it disappears, it becomes obscured, and then it re-emerges elsewhere. But why start here? Because this attends to the inherent uncertainty of method in the strictest sense. Method usually implies a fixed map, but for me, ideas are imminently in flux. Some are explicit, some are implicit, but they're all interconnected in a way that's constantly shifting. By using a rhizomatic lens, we allow our research to be as messy and non-linear as the lives we are actually studying. So the part one, I'm calling neuroquerying methodology or neuroquerying as methodology. And I have to give a little bit of a warning here of why this research fails in advancing its methodological aims. So as Derrida submits, the issue of putting language and order on trial is that one must engage in language and order to do just that. Within the proceedings of the court, the crime is recommitted. So I tread with caution. So building on that rhizome, I want to invoke the posthumanist imagination of Karen Barad. Barad's work has a direct challenge to how we normally categorize the world. Usually we ask, what is this thing? We try to define the student or the intervention as if they are separate, stable boxes. But Barad will ask us to shift our gaze. We shouldn't ask what things are, but rather what they do, and more importantly, what they can do when they are understood as entangled. In this view, materiality and discourse aren't separate. They aren't individual categories we can neatly untangle. Instead, they are known relationally. This is a critique of stability. When we look at a classroom, we aren't just looking at people and objects. We are looking at the emergence of these things together. We are looking at a dance of what Barad refers to as interaction, where the boundaries between the autistic child and the intervention technology begin to blur. But that's fine, and I know myself and get very lost in the theory. So how do I put this all to work? So this brings us to the socio-political weather we're all living in, neoliberalism. David Harvey famously defined this as the financialization of everything. It's not just an economic policy, it's a global ideology that's dominated since the 80s, seeping into our culture and our very psyches. The late theorist Mark Fisher in Capitalist Realism argued that capitalism has come to occupy the horizon of the thinkable. We find it easier to imagine the end of the world than it is to imagine the end of capitalism. And in this neoliberal epoch, power has become incredibly slippery. As Negri and Hart point out, it's hard to leverage power when it's captured every emerging frontier. This capture has led to what Broderick and Rossino call the autism industrial complex. In this system, autistic body minds become raw material for extraction. Think about educational settings. We see a shift towards emotional well-being, which sounds positive, but under neoliberalism, teachers are under precarious anxiety themselves. As Mark Fisher also states, they become emo cops, policing students' emotional lives. In this business ontology, an autistic child is only a success if the data shows behavioural results. We are fixing the individual to fit the machine. rather than questioning why the machine is causing the distress in the first place. So the positive behaviour support competence framework is a 72-page guide to best practice of PBS delivery made by the Positive Behaviour Support Coalition. So that's different organisations that are involved in the implementation of positive behaviour support. So the framework outlines the theoretical and value base of PBS, which you can see at the top left, and provides guidance on assessment and implementation. So PBS is structured around key components drawn from Goratel's 2013 paper, and they're then developed into competence areas detailing what professionals need to know, do, and why it matters. Competencies are organised into 3 levels by professional functions. You'll see that at the bottom, with shared responsibility for implementation. And PBS is implemented through, and this is really important, behaviour support plans, BSPs, least restrictive practices, and the classic behavioural technologies. They don't use the word ABA, but they love the word behavioural technologies and behavioural technology professionals. And effectiveness is evidenced through data collection, particularly reduction in challenging behaviour. And these are used to review and update BSPs. So I'm thinking through Michel Foucault's concept of archaeology to show that PBS isn't just best practice, it's a technological apparatus, or what he describes as a dispositif. When we view autism through a pathological paradigm as a list of communication deficits, for example, we fail to see it as what Ian Hacking calls an interactive kind. The discourse interacts with the person, the concept of autism as deficit shapes the identity of the person being intervened upon. They get lost inside the metaphor. Take the PBS competence framework. It is a web of power knowledge. It constructs a common sense that says reduce challenging behaviour equals improved quality of life. But who defines challenging and who defines quality? This framework functions as a strategy of normalisation. It establishes an idealised norm and then uses surveillance, BSPs, data collection, professional checklists to monitor the abnormal body-mind. By recording, for example, the number of slaps at lunch, we aren't just tracking data, we're actively constructing an autistic subjectivity that is defined solely as in need of intervention. And we are continuously through this reasserting that normal/abnormal binary, with abnormal behaviours becoming the site of intervention. But we have to recognise that these subjectivities that are being constructed aren't static. We aren't just labels on a page in the Baradian sense, we are materially and discursively entangled. We're interactive in space. So how does this look in the special needs classroom? To understand this, I'm bringing in Sarah Ahmed's work on effective economies. Ahmed takes Marx's analysis of how money creates surplus value, money to commodity to money, and applies it to emotions. She argues that affect is essentially embodied meaning making. In this economy, social structures like capitalism and pathologization dictate how emotions move between bodies. Think of these emotions as a kind of currency. They gain values as they stick to certain bodies. In a classroom, certain signs, a look, a movement, a sound, convert into affect. The classroom becomes an affective assemblage, a complex socio-spatial arrangement where the built environment, the people, and the discourse of disability all collide. The PBS competence framework isn't just a document in a drawer here. It works as a sign of the process of normalization. It's the invisible hand that sets the exchange rate for which behaviours are normal and which are abnormal. So let's ground this theory in an example from Jill Plukelec's ethnographic work, Affective Economies, Autism and Challenging Behaviour, Socio-Spatial Relations in Disabled Children's Education. Imagine a classroom during circle time. There's loud music, an advert playing on a screen, and staff talking. Suddenly, a student bites a teaching assistant. In the PBS competence framework, this is a clear-cut incident that meets the definition of challenging behaviour. The values of PBS dictate that we must intervene to improve quality of life. But look at the affective economy in that moment. Plucolette describes the sharp intake of breath, the high-pitched squeal, the assistant shouting, "Did she bite you?" The fury in the room is palpable. That bite has just gained incredible currency. It moves through the bodies in the room, sticking to the student and labeling them as dangerous or violent. By looking at this through the PBS competence framework, we flatten the event. We depoliticize the affect of assemblage, and instead we extract the labor of the bite. We turn an autistic "fuck you" into a determinable function that needs correction. The autistic rhetoric of that moment is lost. It becomes a mere metaphor for a person to become, a site of extraction for the autism industrial complex. So the incident happens, the behavior occurs. What follows is a mechanical process I call the behavior data BSP assemblage. To understand this, we have to look at Marx's Grundrisse and how he talked about alienation. Capitalism hollows out culture through mechanical processes. Mark Fisher takes this further with the concept of flatline constructs. Imagine the bite in the classroom. It is loud, hot, and full of complex affects. But the moment it is entered into a computer as a data point, it undergoes a flattening. In this cybernetic network, the data is dead. It's alienated from the student's actual experience. When a professional looks at this data a week later to update a behaviour support plan, they aren't interacting with the student, they're interacting with dead data. This is the flatline. It deterritorializes the complexity of the human moment and reterritorializes it as a cold textual arrangement that describes the student's future. But what if we refuse the flatline? Remy Yergo offers a radical challenge in their book Authoring Autism on Rhetoric and Neurological Queerness. They talk about the rhetoric of shit smearing. To the PBS machine, this is a maladaptive behaviour that must serve a determinable function and it must be fixed. But Yergo actually asks us, what if shit means nothing? That is a direct strike at the heart of the holistic need to translate autistic rhetoricities. Yergo suggests that autistic rhetoricities aren't a binary opposite to holistic ones. They are rhizomatic. They exist in the in-between. They occur outside of normative space-time. If we assume every autistic acts as a symptom that holds a binary relation to the outside world, we're just looking for more labour to extract. More shit equals more data, which equals more profit for the autism industrial complex. But if we accept that some acts are untranslatable, or they have no binary relation to the outside, we evade the capture of the machine. We stay off the flat line by being unreadable to the system. So looking to the future, that's the next part. So finally, I want to offer a way forward or kind of a way out. And I've described this as what I've coined as xenocrypt futurities. And this is about disorienting the certainties of pathology. I'm somewhat playfully coining the term negative behaviour support as well. And this isn't a how-to guide for schools. I would love to see it implemented. It's a transgressive counter language of ignorance. As Orsini asks, what if knowledge is not the favoured currency? And what if strategically unknowing is what we actually need to disorient the future? I'm drawing here on the work of Liberia Carbonics, Xenofeminism, ZF, which seeks to deploy existing technologies to re-engineer the world. ZF doesn't run away from alienation. It used the tools of alienation to revolt. This is accelerationism, the harnessing of capitalist forces like technology and automation to move beyond capitalism towards a post-scarcity, technologically advanced society, taking the mechanisms of the PBS machine and reorienting them. And here is what I kind of think the values of negative behaviour support could be. So stick a finger up to holistically rhetorical interventions, engage in the politics of the creation of counter languages, continue to unknow autism, and the theory and evidence base, engage closely with non-normative behaviour, more shit spearing, more spitting, and more fuck yous. Deconstruct the fight against ableist logics and the process, engage in the in-between spaces, working rhizomatically, scream at the grave of Ollie Ivor Lovas, set fire to procedural manuals for intervention, perhaps also at the grave of Ollie Ivor Lovas. Those could be done at the same time. And neuroqueer everything. So MBS is a crypt politics. It refused to comply with normal embodiment. It centres what J. Logan Smilges refers to as bad crip feelings, and Remy Yergo refers to as fuck yous as desirable and necessary. We take the lines of flight out of the flattening and move towards a future where autistic rhetoricities are no longer metaphors to be fixed, but imminent ways of being in the world. In conclusion, we have seen how the pathological ontology of autism transforms lives into labour. The PBS competence framework acts as a normalising technology, a mechanical trap designed to flatten the richness of autistic rhetoricity into a spreadsheet. But by identifying these assemblages from the classroom bite to the dead data of the BSP, we can begin to find the lines of flight. We can move towards a xenocrypt future that values the rhizome over the flatline and the untranslatable over the corrected. And I thought I'd end on a quote from a video called S-Pace, made by Adam Wolfond and his mother. So Adam Wolfond described himself as a non-speaking autistic person, and its time is perceived by the appreciation of language, but I am the pace of my body and not language. My body pacing is the task of feeling my body and the feeling of the pace of the environment I am feeling. The work is answering in a logical way about part of the amazing senses, but I am not sensing in the same way. Thank you. I've got a list of my references as well. And again, I'm more than happy to send these over. But yeah, thank you for listening.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Liam. And again, as with Tyler, if you're happy to share your slides, then if you put your contact details in the chat, and then people can contact you. So I've got a couple of questions straight away. There was lots of engagement with your presentation, and I think it's triggered lots of thoughts for people. But there was so to what extent did your critical autism studies masters inform this research? I mean, this is from LB. I'm really enjoying the application of Foucault in particular, and I'm curious about the other theorists that you draw on. I'll see what I can get hold of, but currently not attached to an institution. Yeah, so what?
Yeah. So yeah, I think my critical autism studies masters, absolutely. This was my final dissertation. And yeah, kind of the work of my critical autism studies masters, along with the work in the school that I was working at, and actually kind of I don't know to what extent this is true, but I guess the assistant head describes the school as kind of a critical autism school. It's quite kind of an individual kind of place, and I think kind of those two things combined together. And I guess my love of kind of critical theory and post-structuralism kind of informed this research. And what was the other question? Sorry, Alison.
Just let me go back to Ipscom Steph. I think I just
What about Foucault?
Sophie. No, it's from Sophie. This is. Agree very much with everything that you said. However, I notice in my practical work, which is community organising and social work, that neurodivergence and neuroqueering are quite popular terms to co-opt in order to further focus on functionality and normativity. So promoting neurodivergent people as able to hyperfocus and therefore can work extra hard. And Soph says that they've been hesitant to use both of those terms because of that. So what's your opinion on this?
So yeah, I think that I prefer the term neuroqueering to neurodivergence. I also quite like the term neurocommunism, which I think Robert Chapman kind of discussed about. Kind of think about neuroqueering as this kind of ontological openness. That's what I would kind of describe it as, rather than I feel like neurodivergence, you're right, it's been co-opted. You can probably have like, I don't know, like BAE systems, neurodivergent like led stuff, and like there's loads of kind of stuff at the moment around. I know that the IDF were having had like uh, a neurodivergent wing. So I think that it can be really co-opted for some really dangerous things. Um, but yeah, I think that kind of the kind of what we can take from queer theory of kind of the as queerness as the not yet, as the something to come. That's why I quite like the term neuroqueering, because it kind of opens up the possibilities of of ontological and I guess epistemic openness.
Great, thank you. And I think just lots of comments sort of saying that you've really sort of stimulated people's thoughts. Damien?
Just having thoughts about the push from certain quarters for the term profound autism, the sort of hierarchical splitting of autistic identities itself, the added level of control and surveillance. And it makes me laugh in one way, because someone like my son, who this is all applied to, it's in some ways because someone like my son is the least controllable. It's because they cannot fit the neoliberal mold, and forever will be seen as dysfunctional and outside the norm and risky and needed management and control. And I think in some ways the term profound autism can be seen as another technology of control. Kind of, we need to separate this group off because they're dangerous and risky and challenging. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there's also this tension, I think, right, that I think I've discussed this with Alison a lot before, when I was a teacher, this tension between trying to create these really kind of emancipatory language, emancipatory systems, and then when you're filling out like benefits forms, for example, you use this really kind of pathologizing language that you wouldn't use somewhere else. And it's that how you have to kind of navigate these different kind of systems for access that's really troubling. But yeah, I completely agree with the profound autism thing. And it's just a way to kind of to be able to gatekeep support as well, right? I think. And for local authorities to save money effectively.
The update for the PBS thing, they were trying to be neuro-affirming and things, and there was some kind of update where they stated this framework should be more applied for autistic people with learning disabilities or intellectual impairment. It was a kind of this group still need this intervention and this. You see what I mean? It's like a new
Absolutely
and go away.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I guess the other thing about PBS in general is that it can be quite difficult to be critical of it because no one knows what it is. Uh, like it's so loosely defined.
That's
That
one of the fascinating things in the ABA community discourse in a way, because they're at one extreme end, it's like there's a fear that PBS will become too eclectic or use mentalistic terms, or you must stick to the science and pull it back to hard ABA. Some of the hard ABAers are worried about PBS because it's getting too nebulous and sort of being sort of nudged in other directions, and they don't want it to be hero affirming in essence. They want to keep the control. So it's fascinating, like debates within that community.
yeah. I think as well, ABA is a multi-billion-dollar industry as well, right? And that actually, when there's this kind of this big cultural pushback against ABA, I think maybe it's a way to kind of ensure that industry can survive in some way, and all those people that have been trained as ABA therapists can keep their jobs. I mean, I'm not sure about that. That's kind of just what I was thinking.
I was around at the time, and there was ABA people who literally saying it was a kind of rebranding exercise.
Mm.
And not to all, there's some who truly believe in PBS, like some of my colleagues at work. But it's and it has a long history and everything. But around 2010, there was a significant push about rebranding what people were selling in a sense, and was PBS more friendly sounding than ABA to the autistic community, this kind of thing. It didn't
Mhm.
work.
Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
That's the problem. We keep slipping out of the edges and out of control. That's why we're disliked so much by certain people in life, I guess. I think there's a tension there between social control and the uncontrollable, the deviant, as it were. Like Foucault has talked about sort of dominant discourses, sort of deviant subcultures and discourses
yeah,
forming,
yeah,
escaping the, I think neuroqueering, crippling, all these kind of ideas share a similar kind of idea of destabilizing power. And we do perturb the system naturally. Deleuze, Guattari picked up on it themselves. There's a great quote where they say the autistic child disturbs the local sense of power or something. Focus about. So it's like power relations are disturbed, and we just do it by just being there, which is quite an odd position to be in at times.
Yeah, absolutely. The comment from Katie about ABA sort of claiming to be the only evidence-based model, but what evidence? And that again,
just another rhetorical device, because there
absolutely.
isn't much evidence anyway.
And when you do begin to look at the evidence, it doesn't meet kind of really basic quality thresholds of good research. So yeah, there is no evidence.
I think, yeah.
Liam?
Sorry, I think also it's really interesting. So just the PBS kind of all the evidence base of the PBS is all published in the PBS journal.
It is.
So that's also quite interesting, kind of thinking around kind of where things are published as well.
Yeah, and there's a lot of self citation that happens. So yeah, they tend to cite each other.
Yeah, there's been some high profile kind of issues around that, and it does tend to be a kind of bubble within itself, which can happen within academia, especially when something's become a bit old-fashioned. So outside the learning disability world, behaviorism is seen as a bit sort of mid-20th century, a bit historical. But unfortunately, yeah, it has survived in creating an industry, basically. And it uses scientific rhetorical devices to sound more trustworthy and believable, sell you more product, I guess. my cynical discussion.
I think that's probably
there are
discussed.
things we can do to resist and destabilize.
I think we could probably discuss this for some time, couldn't we? But conscious of that we're just coming to the break. So once again, thank you, Liam, for a really really interesting and provoking somebody written back to the provocations, and again really nicely put. And again, thank you, Tyler. So two really interesting and thoughtful presentations to start the day off. So thank you both. Thank you.
Thank you.